Hi, I'm Phnam.
Hi, I'm Mardis.
And today we're going to talk about the circular economy. In this part of the series, we're covering designing for the planet. How are we going to create systems that are going to create the foundation of the sustainable future that we all want? When it comes to responsible product development, we need to think in systems instead of materials. A quote-unquote sustainable material is not going to make your product fully sustainable. As industrial designers, we design things that have multiple parts in them. And what we need to think about is how we disassemble them after people throw them away after use. Now, what is the circular economy? It's a framework that takes manufactured parts and re-injects them into new product life cycle so it avoids the landfill as many times as possible.
Let's talk about design for disassembly. And what that means is after we've manufactured a part, we've put all the different components together, we have to think about what's going to happen after its useful life is done. We like to think that we can separate these materials. We pull the plastic apart away from the PCB board. We like to pull, say, the wood and the metal, so we can separately recycle them or put them back into use in another way.
When you use glue to connect parts together, it's hard to separate them and make sure there's no glue residue that will contaminate the recycle bin. Thankfully, there are other options we can look into, like different types of fasteners, like screws. We can look into snap geometries, or we can get inspiration from Japanese joinery, for example, that doesn't use anything to connect parts together. So why aren't these methodologies used commonly? Well, we like our products to be seamless. We don't want screws visible everywhere. A lot of the products that we design are created to last between 1 and 5 years, and glue, as of today, is strong enough to sustain that. Now, if we design products to last 100 years, that glue would have to be replaced.
What does the circular economy look like? It's the opposite of a linear economy where products go from the resource to the landfill.
We can reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, and recycle, where recycle is the worst and reusing is the best.
Let's talk about reuse. Now, there are many examples. Some might be clothing, another might be a tool. For instance, we buy a drill and we can use it over and over again because it's been well built, it's been well designed, and then we might resell it again for someone else to use.
Now let's talk about repair. You have a car and something is wrong on it. Are you going to get rid of that car and buy a new one, or are you going to repair it? Well, we go with repair because the value of the car is much higher than how much it would cost to repair it. However, when we buy a TV that's like $500 and it takes that much money to repair it, it's not worth it. And that's why we run into bad habits like buying a new TV every time Black Friday shows up.
Next, let's talk about refurbishing. And you might have seen it on manufacturers' websites. I know I've often bought a refurbished computer. Somebody's previously owned it. They've sent it back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer's fixed whatever's wrong, so they can then sell it again, oftentimes at a little bit of a discount, but it's almost brand new.
Next, let's talk about remanufacturing. So it's basically taking refurbishing to the next level. You might take parts and create new products from those parts. But we need to make sure that the quality of those parts are high enough to meet the requirements of the OEM, and that's the original equipment manufacturer.
When speaking of remanufacturing, we often see these in more expensive devices like medical devices, industrial equipment, and we don't see it quite so much in consumer-grade equipment. And I think, we need to continually have this conversation and find that point, that area where we can make cheaper products remanufacturable.
Finally, let's talk about recycling. It's touted as the be-all and end-all of responsible environmental behavior, but in the end, it's not really that great. Take the situation of plastic. In theory, you could recycle plastic again and again, but we don't do it because we have aesthetic or structural needs that are different than what recycled plastic can offer us. But a recent OECD survey shows that only 9% of plastic waste is actually recycled. The rest is dumped in landfills, incinerated, or left to leach in the environment. Beyond that, some products are marketed as being made of recycled materials, but the percentage of recycled materials is likely closer to 20%.
reusing, repairing, refurbishing, remanufacturing, and recycling are all ways of slowing down the process of a product going into the landfill. But in the grand scheme of things, they don't really solve the problem. They just slow it down. If we want a future devoid of landfills, the only true way we can think of doing it right now is through regenerative design. That is when waste becomes food for nature again.
What will it take to make the circular economy a new standard? The vast majority of developers and manufacturers don't consider the circular economy because it's costly, it takes more time, demands more engineering work, and it's just not worth it to them. From a business standpoint, we need to stop thinking about the environment as a stakeholder that is not as important as anybody else. Business also needs to resist the temptation of virtue signaling, and in this case, is the use of greenwashing in order to boost sales. Instead, they need to practice radical transparency. It's when the entire life cycle of a product is exposed to the user so they can make the best decisions for themselves.
From a design and development standpoint, we have to think about every aspect of the life cycle of a product. That starts with design for disassembly and applying a life cycle analysis to every product we design. The challenge is, as designers, how do we juggle innovation, profitability, and excitement while meeting the needs of the planet?
From a consumer standpoint, we need to teach each other to be more responsible in our consumption habits. No one needs a new phone every year or a new car every 3 or 4 years. If consumers demand more transparencies from the brands that they consume from, it'll be much harder for these brands to hide behind greenwashing.
From a policy standpoint, we need to quit promising things that fail to lead to real change. For example, the Paris Accord. Even if every country did everything they had promised, they'd still fall short of creating extensive, lasting change.
What if we created an economy where the success of a product was directly linked to how it benefits the planet? For example, the company 10 Tree plants 10 trees every time you buy products from them, and that helps offset the carbon footprint of our consumption to make meaningful strides in the right direction.
Thank you for joining us today and being part of this discussion about the circular economy. We look forward to your comments below. And until next time, bye-bye.